There we go. Okay.
Well, good morning, everybody.
And without further ado, you can begin. Oh, and I'm making you host now because I'm going to be going into my car. I'm making you co-host because I'm going to be going to my car for part of it, and I hope I don't drop it, but in case it drops, you'll be co-host or host or whatever.
Okay. Ready? Should we start? Okay. Well, welcome everybody. So this topic for this year is Eliyahu and Elisha. Oh, sorry.
It's Helen.
Hi, Ellen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was looking forward to your class.
Thank you.
Oh,
It's very
wow.
sweet. Well, I hope I don't disappoint you because this is a topic that is fairly new to me from a teaching perspective. So those of you who were with me last year know, those of you who were not with me, I am very, very, I expect and hope and yeah, expect people to totally cooperate and what's the word I'm looking for?
Participate.
Thank you, Paula. Participate in the share, which means talk a lot, ask a lot of questions, argue with me a lot. Okay. When you're not talking, it's better to be muted just because people always have background noise. But when you have something to say, please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so we're going to be speaking about
One more thing.
Yes.
On that note, a great way to do that so that you can say what you want to say and then not have to remember to remute is if you press your space bar and hold it down, you can talk, and then when you let go, it puts you back on mute. So when you're muted, if you press your space bar, talk, and then let go of the space bar, when you're done talking, it goes back to mute and we don't hear your background noise. Okay, carry on.
How do I mute people if I want to mute other people? Can I do that or just you can do that?
Yeah, I think you can do that. Hover over them, or you click on participants and you hover over them and there's a blue button that says mute. Like
Over
I just muted
participants?
someone.
Nope, I don't have it.
Okay.
Better. Well, people are well behaved, so it's all good.
Right.
All right. So here we go. We're talking about Eliyahu and Elisha. And I believe I called the topic the miracle workers, right? That sounds kind of cool. And so it got a lot of you to sign up, which is kind of good. The reason that it's kind of justified to call them miracle workers, even though many of our Nevi'im, as written in Tanakh, have performed miracles here and there of different sorts, or channeled miracles. Let's say that, right? They don't perform miracles. They do whatever they do, and God sends the miracle through them, right? As a simple example, Moshe parting the Red Sea, right? Okay, so Moshe didn't do it, but he was the one who we credit with his doing. So all the many of the prophets did miracles. Eliyahu and Elisha. That is a very, very significant part of how they carried out their job. Okay, let's call it that way. Right. Just to get people into the warm-up participatory mode. When we're going to start with Eliyahu. Okay, I'm soon going to give you introductions, but before we start with Eliyahu, what is it that you think of when you hear Eliyahu or Eliyahu Hanavi? What kind of, let's say, personality image do you get of this man?
You think of Pesach. I do.
Think Pesach. Okay, that's one time that's one time that he enters our lives. Yeah.
I think also a certain sense of mystery, and like he's a mythical.
Right. He's kind of one of these kind of weird kind of, yeah. Okay, good. Cheryl?
I think he's also very zealous, and
you only say that because you know Tanakh.
Maybe. Okay. And also what remains in my mind is when he is Niftar Ki'ilu,
yeah,
and goes up to Shemayim and mysteriously.
Which is similar to what Shoshana said, right? There's some sort of mystery about this man, right? Paul mentioned Pesach. You can also mention Kiseh Shel Eliyahu Hanavi at the bris. And you can also mention Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi that we sing Motzei Shabbat, right? If you don't know about Cheryl calls zealousness, right? If you don't know the Eliyahu Tanakh, I think many of us have the image of kind of like a Middle Eastern Jewish Christmas, Father Christmas, like Santa Claus kind of guy, right? the older bearded nice guy who comes and visits us for Pesach and comes visits us with the bris and
I connect him very much with Geula.
and Geula, right here. Yom Hashem Gadol Vanora. He's going to be there with Mashiach ben David, right?
Eliyahu Yavo Yitaretz Kushiyot. Like
Right.
he is the man of the future who has never died.
Right.
And he's going to come and give us answers.
He's like a good guy, right? He's one of these solve it all kind of, right? He's the answer to our problems. I actually named my son Eliyahu because before I learned Tanakh, that was my image that I had of Eliyahu as well. But he's a little bit more of a forceful personality, as we're going to see. Okay. Today I would like to start with two introductions before we get to our specific topic. One is a more general topic of Sefer Melachim, and those of you who know more Tanakh, I apologize and bear with me. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, just to get a general context of the kind of book that we're going to be looking at. And the second introduction is going to be a more focused introduction background to Eliyahu and the Eliyahu stories. The Eliyahu stories start in Melachim Aleph, Perek Yud Zayin. That is the first time we're going to see that Eliyahu is mentioned and appears. But we're going to start a little bit before that to see the background to what led to Eliyahu coming on the scene. Okay, I'm going to screen share and we're going to start with a more general background just to bring us all to the same page. And that is not what I meant to do. This is what I meant to do. I put my email here because if anybody wants to contact me at other time, questions, comments, whatever, feel free to use my email, B'Simcha Rabah. Okay, here we go, Eliyahu and Elisha. Right. Let's first look at where their stories appear within Tanakh. Okay, we have Torah with Chamisha Chumshei Torah, which starts, as you know, these are history books. It starts, well, I say history books loosely because I don't mean that Torah or Tanakh at all is a history book. It's a theology book, right? We have Torah to teach us whatever lessons, except some of these lessons are, let's say, like Kohelet, right? They're not time bound. They're just things that Kohelet said we're supposed to learn from, or Tehillim, which are praises, which they don't have that much of a historical aspect. And then there are the historical books, which give over their lessons through the use of story and history. Okay, so they're not meant to be history books, but they use history, and through them we can gain some sort of a idea of a timeline from Briat HaOlam until the beginning of Beit Sheni, when Tanakh finishes. So you have Torah, which starts at Briat HaOlam and ends as Moshe dies, which we just read recently, and they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. That's the first phase of our history. Nevi'im, there are two main sets of Nevi'im, okay? The first are called Nevi'im Rishonim, first prophets, and the second are Nevi'im Achronim, which are called second prophets. Nevi'im Rishonim are the ones that continue the storyline, the timeline, the history, right? Because right after Devarim, which we just finished, when they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael, the first thing that happens in Yoshua is the story thread gets picked up. And, oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that you can't see my arrow. Here we go. As soon as they finish, they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael, Yoshua starts with them about to enter Eretz Yisrael, right? And Yoshua and Shoftim is when they conquer and settle the land. And then Sefer Shmuel is the background to kingship, right? David HaMelech become Shaul and David become Melachim, become kings in Sefer Shmuel. And then comes Sefer Melachim. Sefer Melachim is the one that we're going to be focusing on. Sefer Melachim starts with King David dying, passing on the kingship to his son Shlomo. And then there's the whole saga, which we're going to talk about soon in Melachim. Just for the record, notice how there's Shmuel and Melachim and not Shmuel Aleph and Bet and Melachim Aleph, Melachim Bet. you're also going to see there's no Divrei Hayamim Aleph, Divrei Hayamim Bet, Chronicles 1, Chronicles 2. It's one book, okay? Shmuel is one book for convenience, because back then the Torah, the Tanakh was written on scrolls, and a very big scroll was unwieldy. And so the book of Shmuel was traditionally written on two separate parchments, which we can call Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet, but it's one book. Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet happen to be broken up at a convenient spot. Shmuel Aleph talks largely about Shaul's kingdom reign, and Shmuel Bet is largely about David being king. So that's kind of a make sense breakup. The book of Melachim similarly is broken up into two books in a not convenient spot. It's in the middle of one of the king's reigns. It does not make sense. It just proves the point that they're not meant to be separate books. Okay, we're going to talk about Melachim more extensively soon. And then there's a second half of prophets. Okay, these prophets traditionally are all written by prophets, right? Yoshua is written by Yoshua, and Shoftim is written by Shmuel, and Shmuel is written by Shmuel, and Melachim, we are told, is written by Yirmiyahu, and Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel are written by their eponymous authors. And the Treasar, which are these guys, are all written by their names too, right? Hosea wrote Hosea, and Yoel wrote Yoel. The difference between this and this is these books are not historical books. They are set within the historical context, mainly of Sefer Melachim. But these are prophets who gave their prophecies, and we read their prophecies, so saith God, blah, 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 right? And they're usually critical of the kings, but they don't have a storyline except for Sefer Yonah, who is the exception to the rule, where he does actually have a story. All right, so these are Torah, Nevi'im, and at the end we have Ketuvim.
Can I just make one quick comment? Sorry,
Please.
I don't know if this
Please,
is
please, please, yes.
interesting. Yeah, but in the Maftech, the Sefer Tanakh that I have open, and I have several of them, Shmuel Aleph and Bet are separated and part of Nevi'im Rishonim, but Melachim, Aleph and Bet, are considered part of Nevi'im Acharonim. In both
very interesting. I've never seen that.
Of the Tanakh, it's called Maftech LeSefer HaTanakh. That's the front of page, as if an appendix, an annex. At the end, at the entrance of each Tanakh, at least the ones that I have in my house, and it categorizes Melachim as part of Nevi'im Acharonim, which is very interesting. It does not match your story. Yeah.
Very interesting. I've never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. News to me. Again, the traditional breakup between Nevi'im Rishonim and Acharonim is not a chronological. No, it's not these came first and those came later, because these are really Yeshayahu. These are really concurrent with Melachim. But the traditional breakup, as I said, is one uses history to tell its tale, and one is just prophecies. Okay, but so that's an interesting thing they did. All right, let's go quickly through Ketuvim. Ketuvim with writings, right? The three books of which are called wisdom literature, Tehillim, Mishlei, and Eov. These are books that have no timeline. They have no. I mean, Eov has somewhat of a story, but it's mainly philosophy, right? Psalms is praise, Mishlei is Proverbs. And then we have the Megillot. We have the 5 Megillot, which we read throughout the year. Ruth and Esther are stories, and they take place within historical context. Ruth takes place probably at the time of Sefer Shoftim. Esther takes place at the end, right after, during Beit Sheni, before or during Beit Sheni. And then we have the Second Temple, the Beit Sheni books, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Divrei Yamim. Divrei Yamim is very interesting because Divrei Yamim is not exactly, but more or less a sort of repeat of Sefer Melachim, except it's totally different, but it talks about the same events and it talks about the same people. It just tells it in a very different manner. And that's, a big question, which is like the real, right, history, and which is and the answer is there's no real history, right? It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of what you're trying to get across. And the message that the author of Melachim and the message that the author of Divrei Hayamim, who both deal with more or less the same timeline events, their messages are different because their agendas are different. And so they're going to emphasize different things, and they're going to de-emphasize different things, and they're going to give a total different take on these things. Which brings us to to Sefer Malachim, which is what we're talking about. Okay, Sefer Malachim, according to Baba Batra, was written by Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu lived during and after Churban Bayit Rishon, the destruction of the first temple, and it seems like his goal when writing Sefer Malachim, which is again a history, right, more or less of from David's death until the destruction, he is looking at that history with an attempt to explain why did this destruction happen. Okay, what brought about that destruction? And since he's coming from that viewpoint, remember Yirmiyahu, besides writing Malachim and writing Yirmiyahu, also wrote Eicha, right, which we read on Tisha B'Av. He's very pessimistic, and he's looking at this whole history and trying, I think, in each point to point out what it is that we did wrong, because it can't be that that God just decided to destroy the Beit HaMikdash and exile Am Yisrael on a whim, right? It's obviously because we deserved it. Okay, so what did we do to deserve it? And then the whole take on Sefer Malachim will be from the viewpoint of, okay, so we did this wrong, we did this wrong, we did this wrong, right? And so we did deserve it, and therefore it all logically leads into the Churban. All right, so that is the take on Malachim. Divrei Yamim, I'm saying in parenthesis, has a total different agenda, because that Divrei Yamim was written during Bayit Sheni, when the stragglers came back from the exile and they had to rebuild the country, and there was no real prophecy, and there was not really a Beit HaMikdash, and there was not necessarily the sense that, oh, this is the Geula, this is what God wants, this is where we're still God's people. And so Divrei Yamim looks at all the same history and tries to be a lot more encouraging. Okay, Divrei Yamim is a lot more optimistic kind of book, right? But we're not talking about Divrei Yamim, we're talking about Malachim. Okay, so if we're looking at Sefer Malachim, and now you know where we are within the history of our nation, right? Malachim has three main sections. The first part of Sefer Malachim, and when I say Sefer Malachim, I mean Aleph plus Bet, right? The first part of Sefer Malachim, from Malachim, the first 11 chapters of Sefer Malachim is what I call here the United Monarchy. Means that there is one king over all of Am Yisrael, okay? The second section is after Shlomo died and his son Rechavam became king, for whatever reason, obviously a sin of some sort, the kingdom was split. And then we have the main section of Malachim, which is from the first third, more or less, of Sefer Malachim until more or less the middle of Malachim Bet. Well, we have two kingdoms. We have the northern kingdom, which is called Ephraim, which is, you know, it's easier to start with the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom, which is called Yehuda, which is more or less where more or less Yerushalayim and that horizontal line on the map. Okay, Yehuda and some of Shevet Binyamin and Shimon, and not a lot. Okay, two tribes more or less. Everybody else is north of that. Everybody else is from northern Yehuda all the way north, and that's Mamlechet Ephraim. Okay, so there are two separate kingdoms, and Malachim, we're going to see in a minute, is going to give us a simultaneous history and stories of both of these kingdoms. This happened in Yehuda, this happened in Ephraim, this happened in the north, this happened in the south. Okay, that's the main structure. And then at some point, we're going to see in a minute, at some point, the Assyrians came because of the great sin of the northern kingdom, and they came and they conquered and they exiled the northern kingdom, and then all that was left in Israel of Israelite rule was just Yehuda, was just the southern kingdom. And then once again you have a united monarchy because there's only one king, there's only one ruler, and that's just Memlechet Yehuda. And that's the last 7 8 prakim of Sefer Malachim, which ends in the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and the exile also of Yehuda to Bavel. Okay, that is a general structure. I just want to show you this, which is a little bit difficult to see, but again, a sense of how Sefer Malachim is structured. Okay, these are the first section here, right? We had the united monarchy, right, where I said that there was one king over everybody. Sorry. That is Shaul, his son, who reigned and is kind of a footnote in history. David and Shlomo, right? These three kings, Shaul, David, and Shlomo, reigned for, these are actually BCE years. And they were rulers over all, there was no split kingdom. Everybody who was an Israelite, this was their king. Okay, even there were some descendants and whatever, but generally speaking, there was one king for the whole kingdom. After Shlomo died and his son Rechavam became king, then the kingdom split. And then we had the southern kingdom, Mamlechet Yehuda, and we had the northern kingdom, Mamlechet Yisrael. Now, if you look at the years, right, you'll see that the last king here stopped being king at around 724, 723. I think it's actually 722 BC, right? And that's Hoshea. And if you look where it parallels here, that falls out around here in Chizkiyahu's reign. You're seeing my laser pointer, right? You see that? Okay, which means that when these guys were exiled, the northern kingdom was exiled, that was during the reign of Chizkiyahu. And then the last part of Malachim, which talks only about the southern kingdom, because that's all that was left, has these kings reigning. You see that? Okay. Let me just show you, just because, whoa. Let me see if I could do this. Let me just show you. I mentioned that this kingdom was exiled during Chizkiyahu's reign. How do I know that? Because we have here, right? This is the beginning, as I said, of the last 8 prakim in Malachim. And we hear something like this. This is just an example. Vayhi b'shana haravi'it lamelech Chizkiyahu. During the 4th year of the rule of King Chizkiyahu in the southern kingdom in Yehuda, hi hashana shvi'it loHoshea ben Elah, right? That during the 7th year of Hoshea ben Elah, Allah Shalmaneser melech Ashur al-Shamon v'yatzeh, the king of Assyria, whose name was Shalmaneser, he came to Samaria, which is the northern kingdom, and he besieged it, and he got through after 3 years of siege. During the 6th year of, it keeps giving you the chronology, 6th year of Chizkiah, the 9th year of Hoshea, that is when Shomron had fallen, the northern kingdom had fallen. Vayagel melech Ashur et Yisrael, Ashur, and the king of Ashur, of Assyria, exiled all of the northern kingdom to Assyria. These are the 10 tribes that we consider lost. These are not the tribes that later came back to Israel. Those were from the second exile, the one of Yehuda. Right, when after the Churban, when Yehuda was exiled to Babylon, then 70 years later they came back. That's who we are today. But the 10 tribes who were exiled by Assyria, those are the ones that we consider lost, the lost tribes. So they were exiled to Assyria, and this is where they were settled. And then we have the author's evaluation. Okay, historical remark. Why did all this happen? Alasher lo sham'u b'kol Hashem Elohehem, because they did not listen to the voice of Hashem, their God. Vayavru et brito, and they what's the word I'm looking for? The covenant. They not ignored. They
Desecrated.
Thank you. Whatever. Anyway, they did not keep his covenant. Thank you. It kol asher tziva Moshe eved Hashem lo shamu v'lo asu. They didn't listen to anything everything that Moshe, God's servant, told them to do. The Torah, they didn't do. Okay, lo shamu v'lo asu is kind of like a nice play on Naaseh v'nishma, right? Back then we said Naaseh v'nishma. Here we hear lo shamu v'lo asu. It's a chiastic. It said Naaseh nishma. They put the nishma first, right? Lo shamu lo asu, and that's kind of like an end to that. What started Har Sinai for these 10 tribes, this was their end, and that's the end of them. Okay, that's the general style of Sefer Malachim, right? It gives you a story and it gives you a theological explanation of the story. Two more things I want to look at. First of all, I want to look at Mamlechet Yehuda versus Mamlechet Yisrael. Mamlechet Yehuda is generally considered by Tanakh, certainly by Sefer Malachim, to be the more legitimate one. Mamlechet Yehuda is considered to be the legitimate descendants of David HaMelech. And when kings are spoken about in Mamlechet Yehuda, they are always evaluated with David HaMelech as the gold standard. Was this king as good as David, almost as good as David, not as good as David, but the expectation is that they are David's descendants and therefore they're legitimate and therefore they're the good guys. The Mamlechet Yisrael, the northern kingdom, is considered by Sefer Melachim to be the less legitimate of the two. Yerovam ben Nevat was the first king here, and he is the, whatever the opposite of gold is, standard for the northern kingdom. And then when you want to talk about kings in the northern kingdom, it's usually going to be as bad as Yerovam ben Nevat, not as bad as Yerovam ben Nevat, almost as bad as your, right? So David is the good standard here. Yerovam ben Nevat is a bad standard there. One more thing I want to look at, if you look at the how each king became king, just we'll look at it quickly. In Mamlechet Yehuda, right? The first one is Rechavam. Rechavam is Beno Shel Shlomo. He's the king, the son of the previous king, right? That's a normal dynasty. And then we have Aviyah, who's Beno Shel Rechavam. He's the grandson, right? He's the next king in line. If you look at all of them, except with one exception, it's Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel. Atalia here is a kind of an exception, but then we go back to Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel. It's a you really feel like it's a dynasty, a legitimate dynasty that goes from generation to generation, right down through the years. If you look at Mamlechet Yisrael, the things are a little bit rockier. It starts with Yerovam, who was coronated by the people, and then we have his son, but then we have this king because he killed the previous one, and then this was his son Beno Shel, but then this king Ratzach et, he murdered the previous one. And then we have this king who was who co-reigned with this king, and then this king murdered the previous one, right? And then here we have kind of a little dynasty, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, which was again ending in murder. And then we have Beno Shel, Beno Shel, Beno Shel, and then it ended, this king murdered the previous one, and this king murdered the previous one, and here we have again Beno Shel and murdered, and this one was appointed by the Assyrian king. Okay, so you could see, I think, even just from that quick survey, this looks like the Mamlechet Yehuda, the southern kingdom, feels like a legitimate, strong, dynastic, rule. Whereas Mamlechet Yisrael, which is huge, right? It was the 10 tribes. The political situation there seems to have been rockier. In both cases, also Mamlechet Yehuda and also Mamlechet Yisrael, the general, the leadership was pretty much tripartite. You had the king, you had the Kohen, right? The king was in charge of the political and the military, right, aspects of rule. You had the Kohen, who was in charge of the ritual, and in Mamlechet Yehuda we had a Beit Mikdash for all of this, right? From Shlomo, who built the Beit Mikdash, until here when Beit Mikdash was destroyed. But you had a legitimate Beit Mikdash here. In Mamlechet Yisrael, there was obviously no Beit Mikdash, and well, not a legitimate one. And in order to make the break from Mamlechet Yehuda cleaner, and in order to make sure that the people in the northern kingdom remained loyal and paid taxes and bought their gift shop stuff from the northern kingdom and didn't keep making pilgrimages to Yerushalayim, the northern kings established, among others, religious cultic sites to serve the needs of the people, right? And so there was a kind of religious break also between the people in the northern kingdom and the people in the southern kingdom, which was also problematic religiously, okay? And later on, they also had religious cults, not to our God, but to foreign deities. So we said the king and who was in charge of military and political mainly. We have the Kohen here, the Kohen Agadol, and here whatever religious people were appointed for that in the various cultic sites. And we also have the third leg of the leadership is the Navi. There were Nevi'im also in Mamlechet Yehuda and also in Mamlechet Yisrael. The Navi usually sat in or near the palace, and his main function, it seems, other than to teach Torah, which we get some hint of. It seems that their main function was to be the Jiminy Cricket for the king, right? The countess, telling the king, this is what you should be doing, this is good, this is bad, do not stray. Mainly criticizing, a lot of criticizing. And that criticizing of the kings is what we see especially in Nevi'im Achronim, right? Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, right? Those are the ones, the prophecies that we saw before that are mainly prophecies are the ones that they gave the kings as criticism. You know, this is what you're doing wrong, get your act together. Also for Am Yisrael, but primarily for the kings. And those books are another, and we also have those kind of prophecies in Sefer Melachim itself. And that is, I think, enough of an indication to prove that this is not a history book, right? Because if you look at the annals of kings in other countries, the annals will say, this is what our king did. Our king is wonderful. Our king went and conquered. Our king is the strongest. Our king is great. And that's like a history book, maybe biased, but it's a history book. I don't think any king would have paid a scribe to publish the history of how bad he was and how much he's not listening to God, etc. Okay, so again, this book is not a history book. It will use history, but it's mainly a theology book. One last background on Sefer Melachim. Sefer Melachim is kind of a little bit chiastic. We saw that here. Hold on a second, right? If we started with United and ended with United, and in the middle we have the divided kingdoms, right? I'm going to expand this now. At the beginning, you have the rise of Mamlechet Yehuda. You have King David and King Shlomo establishing their reign. And the last, as I said, the last 7-8 prakim is really the last speeding up towards the destruction and the exile. The next few chapters tell of the rise of the northern kingdom. When Shlomo's son becomes king, Rechavam, the kingdom splits, and then you have the beginning of the northern kingdom. At the end, what we read before, right, is the fall of the northern kingdom. That was the end of the fall. We're going to start, our story is going to start with the beginning of the fall of the northern kingdom. Melachim, sorry, I take that back. This is the beginning of the northern kingdom, and this is, we see the fall of the northern kingdom, which we read, right? That was the end when they were exiled. Here we have a list of the middle section, right? The divided kingdom is the kings of Yehuda and Israel also here. But the middle section of all of this focuses on the house of Omri, which we saw here. Remember we said Bno Shel, Bno Shel, Bno Shel, Bno Shel. There's a little bit of a dynasty here. That is the dynasty of the house of Omri. And this is the part that we're focusing on, okay? The part that we're focusing on with Eliyahu and Elisha occurs during the reign of Omri and his sons, Achav and his son, right? That's that. This is the time period that we're going to be looking at. The main issue during this time is the idolatry in the northern kingdom. The house of Omri is the house that ruled in the northern kingdom in Samaria. And the main issue that the prophets had to deal with at that time was the idolatry. And it was especially difficult to deal with because as opposed to what we would like to happen in history, where if you're a good king, then God rewards you and your kingdom is strong. And if you're a bad king, right, like we saw at the end, at some point, God gave up as if. And when people were so bad and the kingdom was so corrupt, then we get punished by exile and destruction, right? House of Omri was kind of an anomaly in this because they were idolatrous. However, their kingdom was very, very strong. And it seemed like, well, if their kingdom was so strong and they're strong militarily and they're strong financially, and it was really a good, strong, functional kingdom, then you'd assume, well, they must be doing something right. They must be doing something good, right? But from our perspective, or from Tanakh's perspective, they weren't, okay? And this is why, especially, you needed a strong figure to come and say, in the face of all that success, well, you are successful, you are thriving. However, and that is where Eliyahu is going to come on the scene. Okay. One last comment on Sefer Melachim before we enter our more focused introduction. The general style in Sefer Melachim, we saw a little bit of this when we saw before that section about the before they were exiled to Assyria. The beginning of each king is going to start like this. It's going to say King X ascended to the throne when the other kingdom had King Y for whatever years. Like in the second year of King A in Yehuda, King B ruled in the northern kingdom. And then later you're going to hear, well, in the 15th year of that king, King B, King C ruled in the southern kingdom, right? So you're going to keep having that synchronization. So we're going to know who was king in the time of whom and how much vetek, right? How many years the king in the other kingdom has been ruling before the new king in the other kingdom rose. Am I being clear, or is this too? Yes, okay, good. Then we hear how many years he was in power, right? King A, in the third year of King A, King B rose in the other kingdom, and he ruled for 18 years. In Yehuda, we also hear how old this king was usually, and the name of the king's mother. Apparently, Yirmiyahu didn't think highly enough about the kings in the northern kingdom because he didn't bother to mention that usually. Then we have the religious assessment. Like I said, the standard, right? Are you as good as David? Are you as bad as Yerovam ben Nevat? Okay, and that is an entirely religious assessment, right? How it's a meter, a religio meter, right? How good are you, a religious king? Then we have this is usually, by the way, the order. The order can be a little bit different, but this is the usual order that we get it. Then we get milestones, right? This is similar to other ancient Near Eastern annals. The stuff that the king did, the main milestones, wars, victories, invasions, deeds. Sometimes this will just be mentioned, like, and he conquered X, Y, Z. And sometimes this will be a whole story. In the case of our cases, right, Achav and Omri, we have wider stories of what they did. And then you have the concluding remarks, which is kind of formulaic. He died, he was buried, he was succeeded by whoever. And if you want to know more about this, then look in Sefer Divrei Hayamim L'Malchei Yisrael, or look in Sefer Divrei Hayamim L'Malchei Yehuda, which are chronicle books that we don't have today. But Tanakh, when they wrote Sefer Melachim, they're not talking about Sefer Divrei Hayamim that we have, not our chronicles, other chronicle books that were really histories, normal histories of the kingdoms that we don't have access to. But apparently they had access to, and so here's another indication that Melachim is not a history book, because Melachim does not put in even some of the major historical events that occurred during this time. It only brings stories that are relevant to whatever theological message the author, in our case Yirmiyahu, wanted to get across. If you want to know what, literally what happened, okay, so look in Sefer Devarim, I mean, in the Chronicles of the House of Judah, House of Israel, and the history is there. We're not dealing with history. We're just going to tell you the parts that are interesting for us. And now I'm going to stop share for a minute because I'm talking way too much. And I'm going to ask, first of all, can we get the Melechet Yisrael Mucharet chart? So the short, Shoshana, if you write to me, I'll try to forward it to you. But you can, it's very easy. Mine may not be necessarily the best one. You can find it online. Just, Google English or Hebrew, list of kings in Tanakh or something like that, and you're going to get an easy chart. Okay, I just happened to pick one that was convenient for my purposes, but some Tanakhim have them also at the end of the Tanakh. Okay, give me a break. Tell me, was that clear? Any questions?
Very clear, but I'm so curious as to why we don't have the Divrei Hayamim L'Malchei Yisrael and Divrei
Because books
Hayamim
were written on parchment, and parchment.
Yeah, but we have a lot of parchments. We have a lot of parchments.
We have a lot of parchments. We have some parchments, and some cases like Divrei. I mean, there are other books that are also mentioned, like in Torah. We also have here, Halo Tuvim al Sefer Hayashar, right? Something called Sefer Hayashar. Tanakh also mentions something called Sefer Milchamot Hashem. So there are other books besides these Sefer Divrei Hayamim that we know had existed. We don't have them. I'm sure there are many other books that Tanakh doesn't mention that had existed that we have no idea. You know,
Right.
maybe
Okay.
tomorrow they're going to dig up Sefer Melchei Yisrael, Divrei Melchei Yisrael. Maybe not, but as of now, we don't have them. That's just a historical archaeological question. Yes, Paula.
When you're talking about the kings in the Northern Kingdom, were they at any time appointed by God, or they just came up politically?
Good question. Excellent question. I'm not gonna share a screen to show you, but I'll show you in a minute. The first king, when there was a split, when the split happened, right? When Rechavam lost most of his kingdom to the north, and instead of calling it the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom, let's just call it Israel and Yehuda, because that's easier. Okay, or Israel and Judah. Israel is the Northern Kingdom, Yehuda is the Southern Kingdom, which is why we are Yehudim, right? The first king that was Yoravam ben Nevat was appointed through a Navi. Okay, Achia Shiloni was the one who appointed Yoravam ben Nevat, telling him, okay, you're now in charge because Rechavam lost his kingdom. After that, it was only either the son of or seizing it by force. Anything else?
Maybe there was a not one, they didn't want to say these books that came from the controversial areas. There was less reason to hold on to these books. That's why the Sfarim, it's possible the scrolls weren't kept as well as the ones in the south. Because
it's possible.
who wants them?
It's possible. That's a good theory, except there's also a Divrei Sefer Divrei Yamim L'Melchei Yehuda, which is Southern Kingdom, and so theoretically should be kept because we have more Southern Kingdom stuff than Northern Kingdom stuff. Books.
That's what I mean. There was less reason to hold on to the stuff from the north because it was
but we
more
also don't have.
controversial.
We also don't have the one from the south. We also don't have the.
But we have more from the south.
I don't know. Maybe. Again, it's an archaeology question on why some books were reigned. You're saying it was more of a we don't want these books. Maybe I don't know, but we don't. We just know that they exist because they happen to be mentioned. So some books like Sefer Yashar and Sefer Melchamat Hashem are mentioned once, but this Sefer, the Chronicles of the King of Yehuda and the Chronicles of the King of Israel, are mentioned as a formulaically at the end of more or less every single king in Malachim. So they must have been, they must have been books. There must have been, and I assume, I don't know if they had more than one copy and why they didn't be throwed, but they didn't. Okay, good. Okay, so let's go back and let us go now to our more focused background. All right, so I mentioned before that Eliyahu comes upon the scene in Malachim Aleph, Perek Yud Zayin. You can open your Tanachim if you'd like, but we're starting before that, okay? Because I want to give you the background. I kind of hinted it before that there was a need for such a person given the success of the Northern Kingdom and the religious misdeeds, okay? So I want to look at it came to a head, right, in the kingdom of Omri, and that's what we're going to look at now. Okay, Malachim Aleph Perek Tet Zayin, for those of you who have an actual book in your hands. If you keep in mind this slide, right, year of ascension, how many years in power, religious assessment, milestones, and concluding comments, we're going to see all that now in the case of Omri. Bishnat 31 shana le'asa melech Yehuda. Okay, so we have a king called Asa in the southern kingdom in Yehuda, and after he was king for already 31 years, okay, here's the synchronization. Malach Omri al Yisrael 12 shana. B'tirtza malach 6 shanim. So we hear that there's a king who rises to the throne in the northern kingdom. His name is Omri. And he ruled for 12 years. The first 6 of them in a place called Tirtza. Vayiken et Hahar Shomron mi'et Shemer. he bought the mountain of Shomron, Samaria, from a man named Shemer. Maybe that is why this place is called Shomron. Maybe Shemer named it after himself if it belonged to him. He paid for it kikraim kesef, 2 blocks of silver. Vayiven et tahar, and he built up this mountain. Vayikra et shem ha'ir asher bana al shem Shemer Adonai Hahar Shomron. And he named this mountain, the city that he built on the mountain, he named it for the previous owner, Shemer, and he named this mountain Shomron. This is going to be the new capital of the northern kingdom. Okay, there were kings before Omri. We saw that. There are a few kings before Omri. Just 1 second, see where we are. Here, Omri is over here. Okay, so we had all these kings who ruled in the northern kingdom with other capitals or with no capitals. Omri finally is the one who builds the capital city. And here we have the religious evaluation. Vayaseh Omri hara be'inei Hashem. He did what was evil in the eyes of God. Vayara mikol asher lefanav. And he was worse than all the ones who came before him. Vayelech b'chol derech Yerovam ben Nevat. Here we have him compared to the standard of the first king, Yerovam ben Nevat. He went in all the ways of Yerovam ben Nevat. Uvechatato, and in his sins, asher echtit Israel, because Yerovam ben Nevat was famous in Tanakh's eyes, not only for sinning, but also causing his people to sin. Lachis et Hashem Elohei Israel behev lahem. They did it lahachis, right? They did it dafka. They did it to anger God. And then we have the ending formula. V'yeter divrei Omri asher asa, and the rest of the things that Omri did. Ugvurato asher asa, and all the, his apparently he did gvura. He had big deeds. He accomplished a lot. Halohim ktuvim al sefer divrei ayamim l'malchei Israel. This is written as a book that we don't have, right? The Northern Kingdom's history, Chronicles. Vayishkav Omri im avotav, and Omri was buried, and this is considered a kind of a point in Tanakh's eyes, to be buried with your forefathers, right, as opposed to being buried on the street, right? So he was buried in the tomb of his forefathers. Be kaver b'Shomron. He was buried in the city of Shomron, in his capital. Vayimloch Achav b'no tachtav, and the next king was Achav, his son. Achav is going to be our main protagonist in our story. This is the background to Achav's reign. So we know who his father was. We know that his father began this dynasty, right? Because finally we have somebody whose son is actually ruling. His father built the capital city, and his father was, as usual, because he's a northern king, a sinner. Okay. If you look at this, and now I'm challenging you, okay? If you look at this section that we just read about Omri, can you tell me we obviously have the explicit bad religious evaluation, right? Vayas hara b'nei Hashem, lachtit Yisrael, lachis, right? Everything bad. Is there anything good that we could say about Omri?
Well, the only thing it explicitly says is that he bought this mountain.
Which is interesting, right? Because we said that we only point out, we know that there's yeter divrei, we know there's other stuff he did, and we know there's even gvurato, right?
Right.
So he must have done,
obviously he had all kinds of victories and all kinds of accomplishments, which are not mentioned, but
which are not mentioned, right? And the one thing that this text finds important enough to mention is that he bought Shomron, and the whole pasuk devoted to Shomron, right? Very lengthy, I think. It didn't just say, and he made Shomron his capital.
And he built it.
And he built it. Okay. So what can we gain from this pasuk? What do we have positive or negative to say about Omri from this pasuk?
Also, the fact that he put money down reminds us very much of the places in the Torah where people are buying land for money.
Give me examples.
Avram Avinu, obviously.
Give me another example. Do you remember?
Shchem.
Shchem. Yaakov bought Shchem. Yafeh me'od. You get 3 points. Bracha. Okay. So yes, there are 3 other people who we hear put down money for buying land. One is Avram Avinu, who bought Marat HaMachpelah in Hebron, right? One is Yaakov, who bought Shchem. One is here Omri, who bought Shomron, and one is earlier on, David HaMelech, who bought Goren Aravna, which later turned into the site of the Beit HaMikdash. That's a pretty nice comparison. I don't think that I would mind being compared to Avram, Yaakov, and David HaMelech. All right. So I think just the fact that you picked up on that, a casual reader picked up on that, I think may have been intentional. Okay. Because it puts him in really good company. That's kind of a point in his favor. Incidentally, all those 4 cities, Hebron, Shechem, Yevus, and Shomron, all became capital cities. Do any of you hear that beeping on my computer?
Yes,
Well, that's really annoying. I'm going to stop it. Hold on.
it's not too
Sorry.
bad.
It bothers me.
I think it's also the same exact wording by Yiken. It's also the same.
Hold on a second. Sorry. Okay. But now you're gonna have to tell me. Oh, my screen's here is shot. Second. Okay. Yeah, sorry. It's the same wording, right? We have Achan and we have the price and we have, right? So on the one hand, he's being compared to these other 3 greats, right? And not only is he being compared, but he's establishing a capital, right? Avram, Hebron was David HaMelech's first capital, right? David reigned for 40 years, the first 7 of them in Hebron, and then in Yerushalayim over everybody. Here too, we hear the first 6 years he was in Tirzah, and later in Shomron over everybody. So it's another little comparison there to David HaMelech. Shechem was a capital in the northern kingdom. Yevus, obviously, Yerushalayim is the capital till today, and Shomron was the capital of the northern kingdom from now until they were exiled by Assyria. Nobody replaced it. The section that we read before had them being exiled from Shomron. I think another small, perhaps, point in his favor is he's naming the city for the previous owner, right? That may just be me, but I think it gives you a sense of, not me, the powerful king, I'm taking over the whole world. It's like, it's some sort of recognition of the past owner, the history, something nice, okay? Why am I pointing this out? Because I mentioned before that one of the most prominent characteristics of the northern kingdom in this period of time is that they were strong. Now, we hear that they were bad religiously. Grotto may have given us some hint, but we have plenty of other evidence that they were strong militarily and they're strong financially. But this, I think, also I keep saying this and I forget that I'm not pointing. This gives us an indication, I think, that they were also strong to some extent socially. In other words, the king had some sort of, maybe you can't even, maybe I'm reading too much into this pasuk because I know other things that happened here, but the king was not removed so much from his people, right? The king was a good king, secular, okay? As a secular king, these kings were good kings. These kings were kings who took care of their populace, as opposed to later on, the later kings who are known for bad, like ignoring and the poor and the widowed and and social injustice and all the things that later prophets
politically correct in those, if
yes.
you could borrow a term that's really not relevant.
As opposed to later kings who were also very corrupt socially. Right. Kings in the house of Omri, which we're going to see also, tended to be socially beseder, okay? And that's kind of uncomfortable because if you don't have the religious prism glasses to look through and you're just watching the news, right? This is a good kingdom. They have a good king and they have a strong economy and they're strong militarily and everything is good and going for them, right? So it's going to take somebody really, really powerful to come and say, get your act together, right? You're worshiping incorrectly, all right? You understand what I'm saying? That's I think going to explain part of why Eliyahu, as we're going to see, is going to be so forceful, because you can't have a wimpy prophet come and deal with this sort of situation. If you have everybody failing, right, and enemies coming and etc., and then you have a prophet say, "Get your act together," they're like, okay, maybe that'll help. But here they don't feel like they need the help.
Yeah, but he doesn't even come and say, get your act together. He takes away the rain and says,
We're
"You're
gonna
not gonna
see
be
that. Hey,
suffering."
you can't do spoilers for people who don't know this.
I'm sorry.
But yes. Okay. All right. Next pasuk. Now we hear about Achav. V'Achav ben Omri malach al Yisrael when b'shnat 38 shana la'asa. So Asa is still king, right? Asa was king when his father, when Achav's father Omri became king, and he's still king in Judah, in Yehuda, when Achav became king. Now he's 38 years already on the throne, this Asa, and Achav becomes king in the northern kingdom. Achav ben Omri melach Yisrael b'shnat 38 la'asa melech Yehuda. Vayimloch Achav melech Omri, and Achav, the son of Omri, ruled over Israel in Shomron for 22 years. Vayas Achav ben Omri hara be'inei Hashem mikol asher lefanav. It sounds a little bit comical, but that's the religious evaluation that we get. Again, he did bad, evil in the eyes of God, worse than everybody before him, presumably also including his father. Vayhi hanakal lichto bechatot Yerovam ben Nevat, since sinning like Yerovam ben Nevat, right? This the evil standard in this kingdom. Since sinning was so light in his eyes, like it was so big deal, not a big deal, that he even Vaikach Isha, who did he marry? Izevel bat et Baal melech Tzidonim. Okay, let's look at this name for a minute. Tzidonim till today is Sidon, right? Lebanon, beyond the northern border of Israel. And her name is Izevel bat et Baal. Izevel sounds today like a mountain of garbage, right? That's because we speak Hebrew. Isabel, if you like the name. Zvul was a Phoenician god. Okay, the back then we didn't call it Lebanon, we called it Phoenicia. And they had several gods. One of them was Zvul. So Izevel is kind of a theophonic name, like we will say Eliyahu, right? Eliyahu, right? Yah is my God, or right? All these names that end in Yah or end in El, Yisrael, right? So other nations also had theophonic names. Izevel is one of those. So is her father, Et Baal, right? Baal was a known Canaanite god. So Izevel bat Et Baal is not only a princess, right? Because Et Baal was the king of the Sidon. So Achav presumably made this marriage for political reasons, because that's what you did back then, right? Because if you marry the daughter of a neighboring king, then you're going to have good relations with the neighbors, right? So that's Shlomo HaMelech was very big on doing that. So Izevel bat Et Baal is not only a good political move, but her name, as she's presented here, personifies foreign gods. Okay, and as we know, when you marry a woman who worships foreign gods, so Achav now worships the Baal, right? The god known as Baal. Vayakem mizbeach labal, and Achav constructs an altar for this Baal, for this god. Beit HaBaal asher bana b'Shomron. Where does he construct this altar? In Samaria, in the capital city of the northern kingdom. Vayas Achav et ha'Asherah. Asherah is another form of foreign worship, so he does that too. Vayosef Achav la'asot la'achis et Hashem Elohei Yisrael mikol melchei Yisrael asher lefanav, and he does worse to anger God than all the previous northern kings. Okay, why is he doing worse than all the previous northern kings? The religious activities in the northern kingdom, forget about the southern kingdom for a moment, bracket that, let's look for a moment at the northern kingdom. Progressively got worse in that when the kingdom first broke off from, let me see you for a minute. There you go. When the kingdom first broke off from Rechavam, right? And I mentioned, in order to make sure that the northern inhabitants remained in the north, right? So the king, Yerovam ben Nevat, established religious centers for them to go to so that they will not have to go to Beit HaMikdash, right? He established such a center in Beit El. He established such a center in Dan. We know he put calves there, right? He even changed the dates. He made Sukkot like a month later so that they won't even be tempted. Whatever it is, it was bad, right? But it was religious practice aimed at our God, Yud Kei Vav Kei. He did it wrong. He did it in a way that was not acceptable, not legitimate, right? Even these agalim, these cows, right, that he put there, right, which sounds idolatrous. They probably were not idolatrous. They were just a non-legitimate way of worshiping our God. Okay, that's how it started off. As time progressed, Bracha, I can't hear you. Bracha, you're muted.
They knew good and well that, to me, it sounds like it was also lahachis, because
okay,
they knew
okay.
about Chet Egel,
Okay.
and Agalim is reminiscent of Chet Egel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so they were rebelling.
Yeah, they were definitely rebelling, but they were rebelling small time. Okay, they were rebelling with a small r, because they still worshipped the correct God. Incorrectly, lahachis, accepted, but they were still worshiping God. As time progressed, they also added on the worship of other deities, which is what is known as syncretism, right? It's kind of like hedging your bets. We'll worship God, we'll worship the other gods. One of them is going to help us. Why not? So they also worship Baal, and our prophets had a lot to say about that. What happened in the time of Achav, as we just saw in this now pasuk, is for the first time in northern Israelite history, foreign worship became politically sanctioned. Right? For the first time, you have a king establishing a religious cult to a foreign god, and it became a legitimate religious site. It's like idolatry became a national religion, right? So we also worship God, and we also worship Baal and Asherah. They're all, legitimate options. Okay, and that is, that is his edge of being worse than everybody else. And then we have what sounds like, I think, a non sequitur. And here's the next pasuk. Here's the next pasuk, if I could find it. Biyamav banach Chiel beit ha'eli. In his days, a man named Chiel, from the house of Eli, whatever, he built Yericho. Ba'aviram bechoro yisada, uvisguv tziro hitziv dlatea, which means that he started, he put the cornerstone, right? He started building Yericho. And as he started it, his eldest son Aviram died. That is, trust me, the meaning of these words. And when he finished building the city, right, when he put on the latot, when he got his tofa shvais, whatever it's called from Chashmal, right, then his youngest son died. In other words, building this city cost him his two sons, his oldest and his youngest son. Chidvar Hashem asher diber biyad Yehoshua bin Nun. And this, losing his oldest son and losing his youngest son, for the purpose of building Yericho, fulfills the prophecy that we had given by Yehoshua bin Nun in God's name. In other words, there was a prophecy that Yehoshua bin Nun at the time had said that if anybody rebuilds Yericho, this is going to happen. This is incidentally a cute, if ever any of you ever play any sort of trivia game and somebody says, okay, where's Yehoshua mentioned other than in the Torah and in Sefer Yehoshua? This is the only time, right? You have a cameo appearance here of Yehoshua in Sefer Melachim. I want to look at Yehoshua right. We have a reference here to what Yehoshua said. So let's look at the reference to what Yehoshua said, and then I want to talk about it for a moment. In Sefer Yehoshua, you know what? Before that, what do we know about Yericho in Sefer Yehoshua?
It was captured miraculously.
That was the first city, right? After Israel crossed the Jordan River and they entered the country, that was the first city that was captured. As you said, Bracha was captured miraculously, right? They walked around the shofars, the whole thing, the wall fell down. Great. Okay, go on. What else do we know about the fall of Yericho, or the story that happened then?
Well, as we know, as it's saying here, as it's referencing, it's not meant to be rebuilt.
It's not meant to be rebuilt, right? Obviously, it's not meant to. Well, according to this reference, we're going to see the origin of this in a minute. Why was it not meant to be rebuilt? Why do you think? In other words, we don't have, except for Ira Nidachat, right, which is a city of a complete idolatry that we have a special mitzvah to never build again once it's destroyed. Why is it that we are not allowed to rebuild Yericho? We're allowed to rebuild any other city that Yeshua conquered. We are not allowed to build Yericho. Why not?
We're supposed to get rid of all the people who lived in the land are supposed to leave.
Okay, so we got rid of the
Okay.
people of Yericho. We destroyed Yericho. 20 years later, why can't we build it and make it put up a kollel there?
Because then they'll come back. The people who were,
Maybe.
there will be some place for them to come back to.
Okay, and what
Then
about
it's
other
not
cities?
exist.
But Adele, other cities that we destroyed and we kicked out the Canaanites were allowed to rebuild. Only Yericho we can't. There's something very specific about Yericho. Let's look now and
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe as a memorial, a perpetual reminder
Of what?
that this is the first city we conquered. It sets the tone. This is the city that set the tone for our conquering of the land.
Thank you, Shoshana. I think that is more where it's going because I'm missing your name, who said that before, that it was captured miraculously, right? Yericho was a showcase. Yericho was, look, it was a whole big, sound and light show. We're entering Israel. God is on our side. And there was even you're not allowed to take any of the cherem. You're not allowed to take any of the loot, right? Everything had to be burnt down to the ground. There was a man named Achan who took some of this loot and he got everybody in really big trouble because we were not supposed to feel like we're the one who conquered. It's not because of our strength, our army. It was God who gave this to us. And it turned into a symbol. It turned into, we have this land and we are conquering this land because God wants us to, because God is on our side, because it was a more of a religious conquest than a military conquest. For later on, Yeshua and his people go and they conquer the rest of the country. And those are military conquests, each one more than the previous one. And then the country is ours and do whatever you want with it. All right. But Yericho was a symbol. It was a kind of a poster child for the this is God's land and he decides who to give it to. Okay. And he gave it to us. Let's just quickly look for a second at the
a wonderful description of Yericho. And I think maybe even you could take it one scary step forward. I don't know if it's true or not, but the fact that it's the border, and they're not building it up to be a fortress, is also a huge statement.
Yeah,
It's saying, like, God's
we're going to be able to you're saying we're going to be able to protect our borders as long as God is on our side, right? Because God is the one who protects us and not our fortresses, right? And if God decides not to protect us, then our fortresses are not going to help either.
doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. We're running out of time. We have 5 more minutes. I just want to quickly look at the pasuk in Yoshua that Melachim is referencing in Yoshua Perek Vav, which is right after the conquest of Yericho. Right, the walls fell, the city is burnt to the ground, and nobody's allowed to take any of the loot. And Yoshua credits it to God, and he says like this: "V'yashba Yoshua be'etahi lemor." He holds Am Yisrael to an oath. Arur, cursed. Ha'ish lifnei Hashem, cursed is the man before God. Asher yakum ve'uvana et ha'ir azot, who will rebuild this city at Yericho. Bivcharo yasdena uvetziro yatziv latea. He will lose his eldest when founding this city, and his youngest when finishing the city. Okay. Again, I think because if you rebuild this city, it's like you're saying, well, it's mine. I have the power to do it, right? And then it kind of contradicts all the wonderful religious sentiments that I just said before. It's a lahaches. If God was our entrance ticket, so to speak, in this country, and we go rebuild this city, which was the symbol of everything God wants us to eradicate, it's like we're bringing it back. We're bringing back the Canaanites. Like Adele said, right? If you rebuild it, they're going to come back. And if not them specifically, idolatry is going to come back. So rebuilding this city in the face of this curse is a way of saying national monuments, religious history, I don't care. Here's a nice piece of real estate. I'm going to build on it. All right. that's kind of really spitting in the face of the entire religious, grandiose heritage of how we entered and conquered and are able are occupy this land with God's blessing. All right, he will be cursed who does this. And then we hear, right, this man named Chiel did this, right? So on the one hand, very nice, the curse was fulfilled, right? As we were told it would be fulfilled, right? He lost his first son, he lost his last son. But just the fact that he was able to get building permits from the government to build up this city, you can't do that behind somebody's back, right? The fact that he got the building permits to build up the city, I think speaks worlds about the kind of religious and national awareness and emotion that was going on at the time. Because if the government says, you know, build Yericho, whatever, right? And this guy goes and builds Yericho, whatever, the religious situation, okay, was not where it should be. Let's just understate that a little bit, okay? And then we have what seems to be another non sequitur, the very next pasuk that we're going to be looking at today. Vayomer Eliyahu tishbi mitoshvei Gilad el Achav. Okay, I'm going to stop before we read the rest of this pasuk. Who is Eliyahu tishbi mitoshvei Gilad? Who is this Eliyahu Navi? The answer is we don't know, because he was never mentioned before. Okay, part of his persona is mysterious and sort of unearthly in some sort of way. He has no history, he has no background. We don't know who his parents are. We don't know. We hear he's mitoshvei HaGilad. He was of the residents of Gilad. Gilad was also on the western border of the western of the Jordan, also east of the Jordan. We don't know who this guy is. And there's no preliminary, and a man named Eliyahu came from Gilad, and nothing. He does kind of the same way he's going to eventually disappear in a poof. He appears in this great poof. And he says, the first thing we hear is, Vayomer Eliyahu, right? That already gives you, I think, a sense of his strong persona. I think I get the impression of him whooshing into the palace room, right? And he says like this, Chai Hashem Elohei Yisrael asher amadati lefanav. This is an oath formula. He's swearing in God's name. Imi hashanim ha'ela talum atar ki'im lefi dori. That from now on there will not be any rain unless I say so. Okay. Our time is up. We're not going to look at we're going to start with this next week. But my point is, given the whole background, the whole, positive national background, but really, really rotten religious background that we're talking about, right? We have this man whoosh in, and the first thing he says, okay, done, no more rain. Okay, that is the entrance cue to Eliyahu Navi and the beginning of our story. And I think this is probably a good place to stop, and I'm going to ask you for comments, questions, complaints. Now's a good time to unmute yourselves and talk.
Really clarified a lot.
Oh, okay.
It's very clear. Thank you.
Good. Well, that's good because Eliyahu is not a clear character. So let's see if we
Great and dramatic introductions.
Well,
It sounds
again,
like Eliyahu, like almost like he must have been known the way, like Tanakh is saying, well, of course you know who he is. He must have been some famous guy. We just don't know about it.
right. But both of those are true, right? We don't know about it, which is why it gives us the impression of this guy who poofed out of nowhere. But he must have been known because he's standing here in the palace room, we're going to see, and he's coming out with this, so obviously he's not a newbie on the scene, right? He's a character who's well known in that time, in that place. But given that the pasuk is constructed the way it is, it gives us the impression or some sort of impression about his character, right? Which I think is a wonderful way of having written this particular pasuk. Beseder? Great. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Besimcha.
Thank you very much.
Very much, Nava. Shabbat
Besimcha.
shalom.
Nice to see you all again. Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.